Hello and welcome to Optional Rule. My name is Scott. I'm going to be your adventure creation lead today. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you'll sit with me. This is a bit of a different session. Normally, I live stream my adventure prep for my upcoming game and my campaign of Rime of the Frost Maiden right now, anyway. But today, I am going to create an adventure for an upcoming Halloween one shot that I typically do. Every year, I'm doing it again this year. I create some unique adventure just to do a one shot for players that I don't normally get to play with, and maybe I can do it a few times. And I make it themed around something for Halloween. So I'm going to do that again this year. I don't need to prep my session, fortunately, because I ended up canceling my session last weekend because one of the players couldn't make it. So the prep I did in last stream is still valid. So it's for me, it's relevant that I can go ahead and do this adventure prep this week for my one shot. Now, this isn't adventure prep in that same way that I was doing the lazy DM technique. I'm going to use a different technique this week that I typically use to create an adventure from scratch. Now, that's from ideation to the design of the one shot itself and some of the elements that I use and frameworks that I use to keep myself constrained to that time frame that I'm looking for, some of the ways I work through it. And you can see that live. Chat with me, please, as we work through all of this in the live stream. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them down in the chat if you're joining me live, or make a comment especially if you're watching this on YouTube. I'll be happy to answer it at any time. Now, my adventure creation technique is a little different than maybe most people. I tend to start with a kernel of what do I want, and I move forward from there. I've got some ideas here. What I'll do is I'll work through the premise that I came up with, why I came up with it, how I ideated through some of the ways that I might do it, and then we'll go into the actual outline of the adventure itself. So by the end of the hour today, we'll keep this to an hour. I'll have the outline of the different encounters, what the core elements of those are, what the challenges will be within them, and I'll walk you through the framework that I do that. Now, I'm going to present a few frameworks here. I want to talk about what frameworks are, and if you have suggestions or comments, please go ahead and make them in the show as we go along. But I tend to use frameworks heavily. If you've joined me before, you've seen I use the Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master by Sly Flourish. I use his techniques to prepare for a session, but this is not the same because session prep assumes that you have an adventure that you're on that's basically written out. Here, what I need to do is actually create the adventure. Now, I really hope in these live streams that it demystifies some of the process of dungeon mastering, that it shows you other people's techniques for using them. I think one of the things that's missing about online conversations of running games or adventure creation or just D&D in general is that it tends to be, you see me looking over to the side. I got to take that window out of the way. Sorry. I need to look at you for this. I think you tend to see people talk in ideal situations that they say, well, if this happens, just do that and you'll be fine. Or if you're encountering this problem, just use that technique and you'll be fine. It all just magically work out. But that's not real dungeon mastering to me. Dungeon mastering is a messy pursuit at best because it mixes all the problems of art and creativity with social management of your group, with the dynamics of timing and pacing at the table, with the mechanics and math involved there and the rules discussion. That's one of the things that makes tabletop role-playing games so fun and so unique, is the mix and the challenge of various aspects that it takes to actually pull off a live game. And running a live game is difficult. It's difficult for anyone. It's not impossible. Anybody can do it. And as a matter of fact, I highly recommend that you do it. And I hope that these streams give you some things to think about. It gives you some tools to use in your own context. You can do other research and find other tools to bring it in. But mostly, I hope it gets across that DMing is a process, it's a discipline, and anybody can really do it if they just sit down, think about what they're looking to do, and move forward. And there's no barrier to entry here. All you have to do is want to run a game. I tweeted about that a little earlier in the month, and in this week, sorry, that just wanting to run a game is enough. And then everything else is just how do you develop that technique of running a game. Let me modify this because for some reason this is in a weird place. Sorry about that, everybody. All right. So, how do we go about creating a session and creating a game? Now, I want to say I'm doing this Halloween Adventure one shot based on Phantom of the Opera because of a challenge issued to me on Twitter that I chose to accept. I thought it'd be great to do. It's a great premise. I love Phantom of the Opera, the play. Although I'm going to be basing this on the short story, on the story, the novel. The I love Phantom of the Opera. I really want to bring something forward. Last year, I did sort of a romance story with a werewolf trapped. It was just really kitschy and kind of common, not very creative. But it got us through the day. It was a nice little adventure. They had some fight with some quicklings and a fight with the werewolves. So here, I want to create one based on a more garish kind of Phantom of the Opera theme for it. So having gone to Twitter, I asked people earlier in the week, thank you for everybody who responded. What should I do? How should I write this Phantom of the Opera based Halloween one shot? Should I do it traditionally or should I subvert expectations? Overwhelmingly, the people that voted said I should subvert expectations. Yeah, no surprise there. I think people will want to. Now, so I do plan to do that. I'll walk through the ideas that I had. So what I typically do when I create an adventure is I sit down and I give it a Halloween one shot based on Phantom of the Opera. Keep that in mind. I set down a premise, which is if you've ever seen the Phantom of the Opera or seen the play or read the book, I won't go into the unpacking the whole story, but I want to use the elements in this way from this story to create an adventure that's achievable. I'm going to stress that achievable in a single session of 2 to 3 hours. Now that I can't emphasize enough because there is a danger of creating an adventure based on a pre-existing work that is unique to that type of adventure creation that I want to express here. First, keeping it to time. So when you create a one-shot adventure, I'll work through a framework to do that they call the Fine Room Dungeon in a moment, and I'll introduce that. But when you create that, you need to focus on what are the absolute key elements of that setting to create encounters and scenarios around during that 2 to 3 hours. And that you're not overpacking it with this 2-hour movie. A movie does not map in time to an adventure. There's people talking, and that's a danger. First, distill it down to a couple really critical key elements that you want to express in that 2 to 3 hours. And two, and this is a big pitfall for people who create adventures based on pre-existing work or a core concept or something like that. You have to make the adventures about the players. The risk with a pre-existing work is you make it about the characters from that work. So in this case, Christina, who's the main character from the Phantom of the Opera, and the Phantom themselves, and maybe some of the minor characters, Raoul and so forth. Those are great, interesting characters, and their backstory is interesting in the adventure, but this adventure is not about them. It is about the player characters, and you want to give interesting teases and twists, and you want to get an interesting background. But mostly you want to give something for the players to react to and for the players to decide about, not lay out a narrative like you're writing a story, because this is the player story. So that's a massive pitfall to creating adventures around pre-existing work. So I'm going to try to avoid that here. You'll hear me struggle with it as I work through the specifics. Now, I've landed on an idea I want to use, but I haven't landed on the specific encounter, so we'll work that out today. So I start out with a premise. A famous singer has gone missing from an opera house. The players must find and recover her by battling what's holding her in bondage. That's the premise of the adventure that I want to state. Now, I'm missing from this, what's the player's agency? What are they deciding? So they decide they should uncover what is the real story, and decide which way the world goes. So they're basically making a moral choice at the end of it. And we'll get what that moral choice is in a second. But that's I want the players to sort of hear people's story, do a path to finding this person, uncover some surprise there, and then make a decision about how this all resolves at the end. I want it to be based on their actions. So the themes that I like out of this, that I see out of Phantom of the Opera, are sort of toxic high culture, because it happens in an opera house, consumption, so people are using one another throughout this story. There's themes of jealousy, there's themes of avarice and greed and all this kind of stuff. There's also this servitude that this young singer is coming up, and as we've seen with sort of the Me Too movement and everything, that these gatekeepers in this industry can really take advantage of people, and in ways that are coming through. Although I don't want to get too heavy in that, because I don't want to create this oppressive social dynamic. It's a horror game at its, and I'm shooting for gothic horror here, so I'll do. But servitude and that sort of coming up and eventually finding your freedom and free will, and sort of shrugging off all of these layers of who people think you are and how they're trying to control you. And the ultimate theme should be that at the end of it, or at least an option if the players choose it. So the hook, I'll reiterate later in the adventure, but the hook is: the party is hired by the producers of a famous local opera house to locate and return their star soprano, who they say was kidnapped by a mysterious specter that haunts their opera house. The players are to come to the opera house with great haste and utmost discretion, as opening night is just 2 days away. They can question the staff and the stars who are gathered there, and no doubt insight will be gained into the fate of the poor girl. I want to emphasize that. So ideas of what is the adventure going to be? I'm going to write a series of encounters that express a story, that give players a chance for combat, for being smart, and for role playing. What do I want it to be? So the ideas I came with, first one is sort of traditional. Is it, the Phantom is just this jealous spirit that kidnaps Christina, and the PC needs to rescue her. Maybe that's it. That's the story. Not so interesting to me, but that I needed to put down that as a core idea. So the twists or other ideas I had, that maybe the Scooby-Doo kind of adventure, right? The rival prima donna. So maybe there was no Phantom, and that Christina is actually being tricked by the rival prima donna into doing something, and there's no actual mystic element to this. It's all stagecraft and stuff like that. That was another idea I had. I think that's interesting, but that wasn't my top idea. I think that although you could flesh that out, the core problem with adventure design around something like that is when you're not including monsters or the fantastic, you're getting into battling people. You're making statements about who's good and evil. That requires a lot of artifice, a lot of skill to pull off to make it exciting in the adventure. Although it could be just a typical heist thing, which is fine. Raoul the villain. So Raoul is this love interest in the Phantom of the Opera. In this idea, Raoul is actually just sort of a controlling person trying to make Christina love him, and he's the one who ran away with her and has been acting like the Phantom. I thought that was a little tropey, to be honest. I thought that a little who cares? Like, why do you care that that Raoul? I mean, of course you would want to free the woman as a player, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like it has a lot of depth for twists and turns, really. It's just sort of it's a jealous lover story, which I'm not sure makes the greatest adventure in the world. At least I don't think I could come up with one. And then here's the one. You can see some text below it, and those are some concepts that I jotted down for myself. I'm not tied to it. But this is the one I sort of liked. I like this idea of Christina, the opera singer, as the hero. Because this trope of kidnapping and the damsel in distress, that's just not interesting, right? It's been done a billion times. It's too tropey. Who cares, right? Christina as the hero. So I loved this concept that she's risen through the ranks of the theater under her own merit. Like, she's had to suffer the personalities and the toxic personalities around her, but she's just so massively talented. She's risen now to stardom. She's befriended this Phantom who her singing has sort of summoned from the Shadowfell. And the Phantom actually is not a villain either. He is, and that's a twist. He's a spirit also trapped in the Shadowfell. And in my version of the Shadowfell, it always reflects the real world, the prime-material plane. So this will take place in an opera house with some sewers underneath it, like if you are familiar with the story. And this would be the sewers will be a passage into the Shadowfell. We'll get to that in a minute. But the Shadowfell version of the theater is full of all the corrupted and vice-driven elements of the theater. So jealousy, greed, avarice, control, vanity, all those things you'll see later. I have some ideas about how we'll stage things around that. And this Phantom is someone, a spirit who's been trapped in that and served the spirits of that corrupted theater, but kind of held in bondage, made to perform for them. In the original Phantom of the Opera, the story, the Phantom was, I think, a person who was brought up, sort of a disfigured person that was made to perform in a sort of a freak show, for people's entertainment, and he's sort of mentally scarred, and that's where that came from. So he's sort of this tragic villain in that story. So I'm going to transfer him not to be a villain, that he's a tragic figure who's been trapped, and that her singing called forth him from the Shadowfell. It opened a passage, and he could visit the prime material plane as a spirit, and they sort of formed a romance back and forth as kindred spirits who were trapped, and they were advising each other. She maybe taught him to sing and so forth. So she's disappeared because now she's got some agency in her life. She's risen to stardom. She could make her own shots, and she decides, I'm going to go save this guy. So she has gone to the Shadowfell to save this guy, and she's sort of trapped there and needs the players to come break her out and finish her own quest to get this person out. That's the premise that I want to set for this adventure. So that would be that the players have to encounter these stage folk, hear the story, sounds fishy, encounter their role play, go through this passage to the underworld, get into the Shadowfell, battle in this version of the theater. The spirits that I want the spirits here to be a reflection of the people they encounter in the opening scenes of the role playing. So I'll get to that in a second and how I'm going to do that, but there'll be sort of spirit toxic versions of them that they have to encounter. Anyway, that's the idea I came up with. I really liked it, so I'm enjoying that idea, and I think I'm going to go with that as a basic premise. So, all right. Let me go arrange some windows here. So you're seeing the Halloween one shot. So the Phantom of the Opera itself, there's a great story here. I pull inspiration from Wikipedia quite often when I write these adventures. There's a richness to life that you can key in on. You can see this painting here. It was done in 1911 as sort of a famous painting. The Phantom of the Opera is based on the Palais Garnier, which is an opera house in Paris itself. It was built in the early 1800s, and there's actually some truth underneath that actual building, which I had the privilege to visit last year, actually. It has a big lake, a cistern that's underneath it that was built originally in it. And they use it today for like underwater fire rescue training and all that kind of, it's interesting, really super interesting. But that's where in Phantom of the Opera, plus you merge in the fame of the Paris sewers and the catacombs, that merged to the story of Phantom of the Opera moving through the sewers of Paris and water and those sorts of elements. So what I want to blend in is the opulence of the theater, the chandelier. That's a big story. If you've seen the play, Phantom of the Opera, the chandelier falling from the sky is a big element from the play. The pageantry of the costumes and so forth. I will say, actually, in the Palais Garnier, there is a huge chandelier there as well that's prominent in the theater. It did not fall in real life and kill somebody. However, a weight did fall and kill a person back in the 1800s. So there's some interesting backstory to that. Anyway, so that's the sabotage of the theater. And I go ahead and visit the Palais Garnier Wikipedia page. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. All right, so let's talk about my adventure. I want to take these ideas. I want to outline them into a series of encounters that are interesting for players, that give them interesting things to work through. So I transferred this summary over here. Now, I'm going to maybe write a quick summary, but I'm going to flesh all this actually out later. I want to work through here in the 40 minutes or so that we have left. Let me create actual adventures, what the stages are that they're working through, and what do I want to achieve in those encounters. And then I can add stuff like descriptions and stat blocks and all that stuff later. But let's work through the process of actually doing this. So summary-wise, I kind of explained that I don't need to know I need to type it out in front of you. I'll type it out later. So summary-wise, I want this to be basically a rescue scenario where the players uncover the twist that the person they're rescuing is actually the hero and the person presented as the villain is actually the victim. And they get there, they untie that these people are held in bondage by perverted reflections of the people they encounter in real life, and they encounter those people in the Shadowfell and they undo it. So they have to also create a passage to the Shadowfell. So it has a nice potential, excuse me, I keep hitting my mic. That has a nice potential for a couple series of encounters. Now, when you do a 2 to 3 hour adventure, There's some things that should jump out at you. There's probably only room for 4, maybe 5 encounters, probably, right? And I mean, in the broad encounters in the broadest sense, a role-playing encounter, puzzles, combat encounters. I wouldn't do more than 2 combat encounters. I think that you're never going to get through 3 combat encounters, in my opinion, unless they're like really quick 1 or 2 rolls. But you're not going to get through multiple combats in 2, maybe maybe more than 2 in the 3-hour. But you'll have to decide yourself. So I'm using what's called the 5-room dungeon format, which is you'll hear a lot of formats if you do any kind of writing or adventure writing. There's the sort of the 3-act play, and then there's the hero's journey, and then there's all. But the 5-room dungeon is something that someone came up with early part of the 2000s, I think. I don't remember the provenance out of it. I vaguely remember back in the days of when I used to participate in the Forge forums in the early 2000s, which was a game design forum discussion group, which was great. A lot of the games like Burning Wheel or Dogs in the Vineyard, those came out of that. And a lot of this narrativist game thinking came out of that group. I won't say they invented it, but a lot of it at least came on my radar at the same time that those discussions were happening. It's somebody, I think back, if I can credit them, I will. Cobalt Hall. I don't know what that is. So basically, a 5-room dungeon. It's an unfortunate term because it doesn't have to be a dungeon. It's a 5 staged encounters that have different themes, that have different types of challenges. When you design a one-shot, provides you with a framework to vary up the challenges to make sure you're getting at roots and different pieces of entertaining architecture and types of encounters for player to encounter in a nice tight 2 hours or a 3-hour time frame. So this framework helps you do that. And that's broken down into an entrance with a guardian, puzzles or role-playing challenges, tricks and a trick and setback. I call it the twist, and then the big climax, and then the reward or other revelations that might happen, the outcome. I call the revelations I think of it as the outcome. So what are all the summation of the player's choices that go down to? So entrance and the guardian. The important part of that, the challenge here, there's also a missing piece of that, which is the setup. You have to go through a setup in an adventure just to give people the premise, give them the information to start things off, and then do all the foreshadowing for the things you're going to reveal in that upcoming session. So entrance with the guardian, and one last thing I'll say is that these don't have to be in order. These can be mixed in all types. If you Google 5-room dungeon, you'll find a lot of great resources on this. There's someone who did an analysis of different structures of adventures that fit into this, and movies can fit into this too. You'll see this structure a lot in movies. You'll see these, they can loop back on each other. The sessions can repeat. Maybe they don't use one of the sort of the themes of the rooms, or they're in different orders. It can happen in all different sort of ways, but there's the reason they exist is very critical to a structure of an adventure. So let's start with something like entrance and the guardian. I want, that's a reason why. What's the gatekeeper to the players coming in? And that I'm going to combine this with the setup. But why isn't just anyone able to go in and fix this? So this creates a nature of individuality or special case for the players of why they and only they can address this problem. That's often a problem with people come out, well, why didn't the town guard handle this? Or why doesn't the army go do it? Or why doesn't the adventurer who lives in some tower, or the sorcerer who lives in some tower nearby, who's 10 levels higher than us, why don't they handle it? There's lots of these elements. So entrance in the guardian, in my Phantom of the Opera case, I think I'm going to combine that. There's no real guardian here. So the guardian is what'll happen is I want to show the opening, really. This is the hook for me. So this is the setup and hiring is really what I want out of this. So it'll be the producers. Let me set this up as a bullet list. I'm going to turn this into a sorry, I got to chat. I'm using Notion SO. This is sort of like a replacement for OneNote. I like it. Good way to keep notes. I keep all my D&D notes in here. You can see up in here my Dungeons & Dragons rules tools. This is my Rime of the Frostmaiden campaign, which has a whole bunch of stuff on it. This is a different Halloween one-shot, Carnival of Fear. I'm working on this one. So producers hire the players, and want discretion. Only worried about money. Only worried about money. And here they encounter all of the other players. So I want the 2 producers to do a lot of role playing, RP, about. I want them to represent greed and gluttony. That's what I want them to do. Greed, loss of profits, loss of profits, loss of profits, and gluttony. I don't know how I'll express it yet, but gluttony. So, and I want this to tie back to the creatures they'll find in the Shadowfell. Gluttony will be worried about how am I supposed to supposed to vacation next year or something like that, to holiday next year. Only concern getting her back before opening night. And they are going to ensure. So I want to set up. So this is the premise. These people will be hiring the players. They want something out of the players, and they start to give them role playing choices. Every setup in an adventure should do two important things. It should tell the players what the world is. What is the world? What's the premise of and baseline assumptions of the world and how it operates? And two, it should give the players a chance to tell the world who they are. So give them some points of view for them to react to, some people for them to like or ally with or enemy with, whatever. So the producers will set that element up. So Carlotta, who is the rival diva that sort of had been the prima donna, but Christina has sort of supplanted her. She's jealous. I want her to represent vanity. And she wants to pull the players. So they're going to give them a story of, this poor girl. They're going to represent toxic culture by faking lots of concern for her welfare. But in reality, all of them actually want something for themselves. So so they'll set the stage that this is just a consuming toxic culture. They wanted to pull, so she she'll pull the players aside. She pulls players aside and offers extra reward for them to make sure Christina doesn't come back. Now, I don't want to be so ham-handed with it, but I will say this about ham-handedness. One-shot adventures, you just have to put it all out there. Subtlety, building up to things. You don't have as much time to build up, especially if you're playing with a group that doesn't know you as a DM very well or know the story. It's very difficult to be subtle. It's very difficult to sort of build things and twist little knobs and get things moving forward in the adventure. You really sort of have to just lay it all out there. So she'll fake concern for the girl, so that she's better off, that she's in love, obviously, and would be happier somewhere else. Would be happier in quotes somewhere else. All right. So there'll be this sort of concern. It'll be the beginning of the play, sort of. They'll come to the theater itself. They'll see all these people in sort of this syncopated concern and moving around, but they're really just listening to themselves, and they're expressing all of the concerns, hiring the player, giving them some motive. Well, she was last seen with this ghost. She's known to be talking to a ghost at night, and they're afraid that this ghost had taken her, and Carlotta wants her gone. The producers want the ghost dead because they just don't want them to interfere with her profits. And Raul, I don't know how to spell that. R-U-L-L. Raul, that's the romantic interest in the play, but here I'm going to make him just sort of an effete snob, or someone who is just interested in possessing a big star as sort of a badge for him as a Viscount. And so I want him to represent pride. So he is going to ask the players to return her in good spirit because he's concerned about their wedding. This is kind of weak, but this is all I got. He doesn't want to be embarrassed. And she has not yet answered him about his proposals, we'll say. And she has not yet, because she blew him off. She was like, I don't know what to think about that. And she probably didn't answer him. Has not answered him about his proposal. So he just doesn't want to be embarrassed. So that's the stakes. I'm setting the stakes. I don't want to linger with this. This is about a 15-minute open with some role playing. The players will come in. They'll get the opulence of the theater. I also want to lay on thick that the theater is sort of, it's just gilded. It's not behind the scenes great, and all these people are sort of weird and toxic. But they'll hire them. They'll tell the players that she's gone. She was last seen. We'll say, well, we'll have to give some kind of indicator. So here's another thing. Moving from scene to scene can be very challenging. Segues are hard, especially when you want to do 5 or 6 different scenes. If you do a dungeon, you just open the door and walk into the next room. But these adventures where you're moving from location to location, you want some sort of segue. So what I want to do is send the players into the sewers to the cistern underneath the opera house, and I want to create some reason. So I will create a reason. So transition will be that rumor or clue. Will be to talk to the stage hands that say she went into the sewer, into the cistern. We'll say. Why I don't want to make them run around the sewer. And heard singing down, and she was last heard singing down there. That'll link to a puzzle I'll get to in a second. And last heard singing down there. That will tease to the players too. Stagehand. Get this information from stagehands. So give them a chance to sort of commiserate with the common man that these people are all crazy and greedy and toxic. But so all of the producers, Carlotta, Raul, will talk about the Phantom corrupting this poor innocent girl. They'll basically lay on this sort of tropey story about poor innocent damsel in distress who's just, there's somebody they want to control. When they talk to the stagehand was, no, she's she's really super talented. She's a great person. She was good to them. So I have to put that down. She was good to them. And that she wasn't kidnapped or drug out or anything like that. They saw her go into the she grabbed a weapon. We'll even say, because she's a bard, and she grabbed some weapons and she went into the cistern, and she was last heard singing, and the singing suddenly ended. And that's what last heard singing in cistern, and it suddenly ended. All right, so should I tease something more? I'll figure that out later. So she what's my spell correct? I'll worry about spelling corrector. So I think I'm actually going to keep this in order, by the way, these scenes and encounters. So the players have got the adventure. They've done role playing with the crew. They're all toxic, and they lay down the story, and they give them some agency. The producers just want the girl back, and they'll pay. They don't care about anything else. Carlotta wants her to disappear, so she'll offer an extra reward if they can convince Christina to come back, and she might even imply she doesn't want her to come back, so maybe players can kill her if they're playing evil characters. I hope not. I don't really run games like that. But Raul has prideful, and he just wants her brought back, and I'll have to set down some family heirloom he wants back, or something like that. And then transition with the stagehands to lead them to the cistern, which is where I want them to go next. So this is where I want a puzzle or role-playing challenge. I know it's going to be a role-playing challenge. I mean, a puzzle. I don't want it to be, I don't care. So I want the puzzle and passage. So I want them to create to discover a passage into the Shadowfell. Now I love this idea for a passage in the Shadowfell that I've used before, where I've used a natural pond before, where you have to swim down to the bottom of this pond, and as you get deeper and deeper, the gloom comes in, and then suddenly you're aware that you're feeling like you're rising through the water instead, and you basically transition at some point, and you exit through the bottom of this pool into the Shadowfell itself. That's what I want out of this part of the adventure. So I want to set up some puzzle that the player, and I also want an encounter here. So I want the players will go into the sewer, they'll get to the cistern, they'll see sort of this grand art and these effigies around the cistern itself. So let me start adding these ideas before I forget them. And what I want them to do is figure out a small puzzle to be able to open the gateway to the Shadowfell. So cistern has all kinds of figures, all kinds of effigies. and sculptures that are they don't know they're going to the Shadowfell at this point. That's another thing. When you write adventures, by the way, big advice: write the adventures for the game masters. Tell them at the front what's going on. Don't do this cutesy thing where you think you're writing a novel and you want to do the big reveal at the end. That's not what the game master needs. The game master needs to know what is going on so they can do foreshadowing. They can bring you through with pacing and setup and everything exactly right. Don't bury the lead. Give the adventure right up front and do that, because this is not written for players. Adventures are written for game masters. They perform that adventure for players. So the cistern is all kinds of effigies, sculptures, and so forth. What I want to do is set up sculptures of fairies, of corrupted fairies. I want to give some foreshadowing to the players that this is an entrance into the Fey realm. Fairies. I also want to have gargoyles there also, because I'll get to that in a second. My idea for an encounter here, also want gargoyles. Oh, why? I can't spell anything today. So the idea here is I want them to be able to open a passage to the Shadowfell through a puzzle. So the puzzle, I think, would have to link back to her voice. Like I've set up a premise already in this adventure that Christina is summoning the spirit from the Shadowfell, or at least opening a pathway for him with her voice. So it must be some kind of singing puzzle. Singing puzzle to open the pathway to the Shadowfell. Now, the thing about puzzles like this, when you create an adventure, you don't want to gate the additional content behind a pass-fail puzzle. You just want the puzzle to be something that does a few things for you. The puzzle will be, so I imagine, I don't know, I always have a hard time coming up with puzzles. So this is another piece of advice for adventure creation. The perfect is the enemy of the good is something that's said. It's an old saying. It says if you try to over optimize, if you just try to wring every piece of quality you can out of something, that you'll never actually create something. You won't go with what would have been good that you could have done. You'll end up wasting all your time and then eventually never finish a product. That is so true when it comes to adventure creation. You have to go with what you got. I'm doing that here right now. I have a couple of ideas that I'm expressing about this Phantom of the Opera adventure, but I welcome. I see a couple people come in. I've just come in recently. I see a bump. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I hope you'll say hi in this chat. But we're creating an adventure around the Phantom of the Opera. The premise here is that the lead singer, Christine, has gone through to the Shadowfell to free the Phantom, who is actually a tragic figure himself trapped, and they are lovers and they are in love. So, we're at the point now where the gate to the Shadowfell in this sort of 5-room dungeon outlay that I'm trying to do. So the puzzle here, I will say that on the ceiling is what I was saying about puzzles. You don't want to gate content beyond the puzzle so that players can't progress if they don't figure it out. What you want to do is create some sort of advantage for them if they figure it out, but some other default way to get them into the next stage if they don't figure it out. So figuring it out gives them some bonus or treasure or something else. It puts them in a position of advantage. Not figuring it out pulls them through anyway, but at some additional cost. So here I want the puzzle to basically be, all I can think of is if she looks up, I'll describe the water of the circular cistern, water. Before I do that, I'll describe ceiling, the roof above the cistern, cistern, to be these concentric circles that look like a sound wave. That look like a sound wave, and describe water in the cistern as reflecting that cistern, as sort of having similar looking ripples as the players talk, as similar as players talk. So the puzzle here is they have to do some sort of performance check to sing notes that would match the pattern on the roof. Sing notes that match pattern on the roof. And if they do, they'll notice a glow begin at the bottom of the cistern, and they know that a passage has opened up. Now, if they don't, here's the thing, because this will happen either way. What I want is an encounter. I want a small encounter here. I love the idea of them diving into the water, going down. We'll say cistern is, we'll say 45, we'll say it's 50 feet. So feet deep, which is reasonable. The reason being is players have half of their movement in swimming. Generally speaking, it's difficult terrain. They're able to swim about 15 feet per round. If I put it at 50 feet, that's a little over 3 rounds of swimming. Breath holding in D&D is a minimum of 30 seconds, so that's 6 rounds, and is it's 1 minute plus your Constitution modifier. If you have a negative Constitution modifier, it's 30 seconds. So it's 6, it's 5 to 10 rounds is what it is. So if they're at the 4, 3.5, 4 mark, that's right at the limit of the worst breath. That time that anyone can have. And I want to put an obstacle in this way. I want to put in a water weird in the water and I'll put a number equal to the party level that is appropriate for a challenge for the party level. Medium encounter for party. I want to go medium, and I do not want to do hard. And I certainly don't want to do deadly, because there's 2 ways that they're probably going to fight them in the water. Fighting in the water is a very difficult prospect. You're often at disadvantage. You're wasting time as you're starting to suffocate. These things can grapple you. They have some grapple ability. Let's go to D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond. And look up water weird. Water. Why? I think that's how you pronounce it. Yep, water weird. Oh. E-I-R-D. Here we go. Water weirds can constrict and grapple. That's crazy good when you have somebody underwater. That would create a high level of attention. So there's 2 ways these water weirds can interact. So the default, if the players don't figure out that puzzle, the way they get in is after a while standing around the cistern and looking around, one of the water weirds or a couple of them will pop out of the water, grab players and drag them in, and they'll begin to drag them down to the bottom to the Shadowfell, so they'll see the gate opening when the water weirds open it. So the advantage, and they'll be attacked either way. So the advantage, if the players figure it out, they start to swim down, they'll be several rounds down in the water before the water weirds attack, and they'll still have a combat, but at that point they can choose to just swim through to the other side and get out and escape the combat, or they can finish off the water weirds if they're feeling comfortable and great. If the players don't figure it out, the downside will be the water weirds grab them, pull them into the water, start a combat there, and they're going to have to figure this whole thing out with the water weirds in the water. And actually, it's not that big difference, because they could choose to fight them at the surface and sort of work it out, but they're a guardian that leads them to the next level. So that satisfies this passage puzzle. And I'll put a note in here: water weirds attacking, open gate. Open the gate to swallow their soul, or something like that. To swallow soul. All right, so that's that puzzle and passage piece of the 5-room dungeon structure. We have a couple more twists and setbacks. So what I want to do, and I think we're about down to 20 minutes here. So far what we have, the entrance of the guardian. The gatekeepers are the people hiring the players and giving them information of where the gateway to the Shadowfell is, where Christina has gone. They think been kidnapped, but where she's actually gone on her own. Puzzle and passage is that gateway to the Shadowfell, where the players either have to figure out the riddle and then get past the water weirds, or be attacked by the water weirds and work their way through the entire water column with that risk involved. Once they get out, I want them to exit into the Shadowfell, and I want to just do a lot of description. I'll have to do some other encounters here, but basically they'll see a perverted, a corrupted version of this theater. I'll have it described as gold, and if you ever see pictures of the Palais Garnier, it's just beautiful. I've been there, but it'll have all this flaked off gold, tarnished gold, moldy hanging curtains and tapestries, and it'll have just depressed looking attendees who are bored and not looking. And what I want is, and this will really be the twist. The twist is they discover here the Phantom. So I want the Phantom, the one that they've been built up as the person who has kidnapped Christina, to actually not be the kidnapper at all. They encounter the Phantom bound and being forced to perform like a hurdy-gurdy. I love this idea, because in the play, one of his things is a monkey that's turning a hurdy-gurdy that he sings because it makes the Phantom remember the people who took advantage of him when he was younger. And I like that. I like that imagery. And count UNTOUNTER. And they counted. But I love this in the Shadowfell. Maybe that would actually be the Phantom is bound to this hurdy-gurdy player and forced to like jump and cajole and all this stuff, bound and to hurdy-gurdy player. And actually, we'll make it mechanical. We'll make it this weird, creepy mechanical to mechanical person as a hurdy-gurdy. And it's actually not a hurdy-gurdy. The name for the instrument is something else, but that's what I know it as. And players free him. That might be another encounter. Free him and get the story of what really happened. So what really happened is Christina came to save him, and he'll tell the players, oh no, Christina and I are in love. He's being controlled by all of these people that don't have an interest in their mind and what's in mind. And I will tell them, you have to save her. They're taking her light. I'll say something. They're taking her. He'll say they are taking her light, and will drain her of it, and drain her completely. So what I want to do, and then he'll set them up that she's being held and these other spirits that are pulling her energy from it to feed them and their horrible personality traits, which is what I wanted to set up from earlier. So if you go earlier, when I talked about all of these set up villains, the people in the theater who are acting like heroes but actually villains, I want their vices to be represented as spirits in this other world. And I need to make that obvious to the players. Again, you don't want to be subtle in a one-shot adventure. So I want to describe each one of these people as having some very obvious physical trait or very obvious clothing or something like that, something that's very noticeable that can be tied to that spirit in the other world. So I'll have to do the same with the Phantom. Like, how will they recognize him? I'll say he's describe his mask as something unique, as something identifying, and clothing, we'll say, because he had to wear that mask in the real world too. But I'll go to like the producers will have like the greedy one will have like heavy gold chains and rings, and the gluttonous one will be just really heavy and fleshy and wear sort of oversized clothing or something, and Carlotta will have ermine skins and fines, things like that. And Rahl will have some sort of, he'll have some sort of crest on or something like that I'll describe. So when I get to this, what I want the climax to be is they come in, and if you remember earlier, I talked about wanting to use the elements of the story. One of the big elements is this chandelier. So I want to use the chandelier here. And what I think I'm going to say is Christina is sort of trapped in the center of a crystal chandelier, and her light sort of is shining through it onto these corrupt spirits that will be in there, and they're sort of feeding off of her. Well, most of them feeding off her light, center of the chandelier and drawing out her light. All right, so here's the combat. I want the players to get to the center stage. The chandelier is here. Christina's trapped in the middle of it, and these sort of spirits of these corrupt spirits are around her and drawing it out. So I want them to battle those spirits to free her, get Christina back to the real world. So those spirits are. They each should have some special power. I love this idea of vanity and pride for Carlotta and Rahl, and I love the idea of gluttony and greed for the two producers, and those will be the spirits. Now, one of the MacGuffins I want to set up here, and MacGuffin is just some trope that you want to use. I want a stage light to be focused on, or stage lights to be focused on the vanity spirit and the pride spirit. And they have some special ability that can work as long as they're in the light. And the gluttony and the greed spirits are out of the light, and their powers don't work if they're in the light. So the vice versa. So that's a setup I want to do. That might be subtle, and I'll tease it when I describe them. The vanities person is on the stage, and I want to describe the vanity spirit. Vanity will have I'll describe her as the furs that Carlotta has been described at. I'll describe this vanity spirit as having sort of bloody skins, animal skins on her still, that are supposed to represent just what the furs really are. With bloody, I like that. That's really creepy. Bloody animal skins, furs, we'll say, and very dirty. And misshapen. Well, we'll leave that out. I don't want to make physical appearance of sort of the vilifying thing. It's her intent, right? So she'll have the power of. I want them each to have some power based. So vanity pulls. They need to feed off of you to feed them. That's what I want from this. So she'll have the ability to she'll heal herself. Half hit points. HPs for damage done to players. Actually, she'll heal all of them. It would be great to have all of them have some power that affects the other ones, and that the players have to start making choices about who to take out first. Heal spirits. Heal spirits. Half when the players, as long as she's in the light, that will be her power. So pride is. I'll just describe him in that shield. He'll have like a big, gaudy shield huge shield across chest. And so his power will be, as long as he's in the light, he can. What will I do here? I will say his power is that he. So it's Bane. So Bane and Bless. I hate Bless on the part of villains, because the effect should be on the players for them to feel it in an adventure. I think that's a better design. When you're setting up an adventure, like giving a bonus to the villains, that's cool. They get good dice. That makes their role seem sort of very, very dangerous, but players feel it when it's affecting them. So I would love Pride to be, let's do Bane. Every turn, the players get to save against DC or suffer Bane. What I like about that is it doesn't saddle a character. When you cast a spell Bane, it saddles the character with it. There's this concentration problem. It's this whole bit, and they just have it. There's no recourse to it. They don't get to save every turn. I love the idea of saving every turn, and so not the same player is not necessarily stuck with Bane every time. So that will be that character's special ability as long as they are in the light. So Gluttony and Greed are the two remaining ones. So Gluttony should, what do they consume, right? They strike, so they should be able to do like necro. So Pride should basically be able to do, Vanity should be able to do psychic damage, right? Psychic damage, and that works no matter what, not just when they're in the, in the light. What's going on? All right, and so that Bane is a special ability of Pride, but they do, they'll do like. I don't know. I was going to say celestial damage, but that's not really what I want. It would be like just a cutting edge of their. We'll say, I don't know. We'll say celestial for now. Celestial damage. Well, I'll figure something out later. I don't actually like that. I would prefer some sort of corrupted light ability than a celestial damage, but that's fine. Gluttony, what do? They consume out of you. They do necromantic damage, necrotic damage, and what would their specialty be? Like special is consume, So they pull your energy out of you or something like that. So we'll say save or half movement. And actually, I like the idea of save every time. So like all right, Vanity, she heals spirits half hit points for damage done to other players if they fail a save when hit. So that will be it. So I like the idea of it's variable. It doesn't have to happen every time. It gives them some. It gives some variance to the thing. It just doesn't tell them, oh well, you're screwed. There's nothing you can do about this. Greed. That is. I'm trying to avoid these all being psychic damage, right? Greed is blunt damage because it's the same bludgeoning damage. And we'll say actually pride is slashing damage. It's cutting wit or something like that. Bludgeoning damage, and again, I can't spell. And what will those special abilities? So greed would have to do with your items, right? So it would make your greed is this might be a little hard, but I'm going to put it down. So heat metal. Once around, found on random target. Yeah, the thing I hate about heat metal is it has no save. It just kind of happens. But if it switches every round, a random switch target. Yeah, switched. So it's not maintained. So I don't have to just put heat on somebody's armor and then the big fighter is taking damage every round. It'll switch every round. So that's damage add. So damage over time. There's one that slows them down. Effectively, gluttony slows them down. Pride suffers bane and it makes them feel bad about themselves, right? And vanity heals other spirits as long as they've got attention. So all right, so that's it. They go through this. They'll realize through the teasing of how they look that these are manifestations of the people they met in the real world. They'll have to defeat all of them, free. So that's a great four person. By the way, level wise, I'm shooting for about 5th level because once you go over into the Shadowfell or do any kind of dimension hopping, you end up, you should be about 5th level or above. You should be around tier 2. So they'll defeat this sort of these bosses. They've started in the theater, got the story, interacted, did the puzzle to get into the Shadowfell, encountered the water wheel to get there. They'll go encounter maybe the lobby to free the Phantom. They get into the main theater. They do battle. They see Christina trapped in the chandelier. Everyone's sort of gaining warmth from her. They'll do battle with these 4 spirits of vanity, pride, gluttony, and greed in the theater itself, defeat them, free Christina. Christina and the Phantom will be together. We'll come out. Now we reward and revelation. And that's really up to the players. The players will decide, do they want to knock off Christina as Carlotta has tried to bribe them? I doubt it. Will they convince her to go back? Will they, I might add in something. Well, I don't want to add in too much. It's a one shot. Remember, Scott, the one shot. They will come out and basically tell everybody that she can take control or do whatever they want next. Will they bring the Phantom back? So the reward and revelation is basically what the players want to decide is they can call out the producers, Carlotta and everybody for their weirdness. We'll have some police show up. That's it. Show up, ask what happened, and they can and basically say it's a Deus Ex. The players are the machine in this. It's Deus Ex Machina with the players. The players can turn these people in for taking advantage of Christina or not, or take some whatever step, and they could basically decide the resolution of the adventure and end it there. So bringing her back through the portal to the real world with the Phantom, who will join her, and they'll live together in happiness or something like that. All right, so we're right about the hour. That's the adventure. That's the layout. It's a setup at the theater, getting the story of this damsel in distress, but realizing that doesn't seem to be right. These people are super toxic. They go down into the sewers to the cistern. They uncover a puzzle that they have to unlock to get into the Shadowfell. They fight some water weirds. To get across the portal, they encounter sort of the corrupted version of the theater itself with the Phantom being held in bondage. They help free him. They uncover the story there that they were actually in love, that these people are all taking advantage of her, and she's the hero. They get into the theater, free her from these deadly sin-esque Fae spirits that are reflections of the people in the real world that are holding her captive. They release her. They come back to the real world and tell everybody, okay, yo, this is what's up. You're all a bunch of jerks, and we're putting her in charge of the theater or whatever. So that's it. All right, that's my one-shot adventure. I'm going to go ahead and write this up this week. I'm going to post it online. This won't be the quality of a published adventure, but it'll have the encounter so you could actually run it yourself. I really enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to running this one shot. I'll probably do it this Friday, and I'll tell people how it went next week. I will return next Saturday with my typical live stream prep for my Rime of the Frost Maiden game. Again, go ahead and tell me how you are going to do something for the Halloween. Dairy Dice Roller, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. Stunned at how fast I put it together. I think if you use these frameworks, you can really put together an outline. It doesn't take much. The truth is you just got to get out there and run games. Some of them are going to be great. Some of them are not going to be great. You can't always tell beforehand which are great and which are not great. So I really just encourage you to do it. Over the course of, I've been running games for 40 years. Over the course of a year, you're going to run 52 sessions or more if you run every week. Some of them are going to be good. Some of them are going to be, bad. Most of them are just going to be just fine. Players, you care way more about your adventures than the players do. They just want to get together and play. We put all this thought into it, which we should, but keep the players in mind. And remember, you're fine. You're probably fine. What's the worst that can happen? You get together with friends, you have a couple laughs, a couple rolls don't go your way. People go home. They had a good time. What's the downside? All right. Thank you very much for joining me as Dairy Dice Roller. I hope you don't mind me giving you a shout out today. I hope you'll follow me on Twitch, on YouTube, on Twitter as well. Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. Go ahead and do all the likes, follow. Sorry, my brain's getting mixed up as I'm trying to wrap this up in time. Go ahead and give me a follow, give me a like. I really would appreciate it if you did that. Please share these videos if you're seeing them later. It would really help me grow this a little bit and start to engage other people. I'm never going to be big. I would just love to engage with people. And I would love to do a shout out for Dairy Dice Roller. You can find them on Twitter under that handle, Dairy Dice Roller. I suggest you follow them. Specifically, they're helping bring gaming to children in need. And I'm probably describing it wrong, and I'm doing this ad hoc. But I know that they try to reach out, advance gaming against children in poverty or people in need. I hope you will support them in that effort. I want to see more games run. I love this hobby. I've been doing it longer and more than I've been doing anything else in my entire life. So I love it. So thank you for joining me. I hope you'll enjoy me you'll join me next week for some conversation and some more dungeon creation and continuation of my Rime of the Frost Maiden game. It's been great to do this every week. I'm really starting to enjoy it. And yes, I will produce videos over time. In the next few weeks, I'll start producing them, and we're getting closer to that. I thank you for the questions here. Go ahead and engage me on Twitter and send a comment if you haven't. It's been great to talk to you again. I hope you'll join me next week. And remember, until then, remember that fun is not optional. Thank you, everybody, and have a good week. I'm not good at controlling all of my outros yet.